When you see these 5 watches, run. They look impressive, have the reputation, but they aren't worth it actually. And I have got 5 other watches that will impress people who knew about watches and people who don't. So, which 5 brands are the ones cashing in on reputation? And which 5 watches still earn their price the hard way, the right way? Find out. Brand 5. Fossil. There's a number Fossil executives have been very quiet about since late 2024, 43%. If you say it in front of an exec, you'll see the smile drain from their faces. That 43% is how much the company's stock fell in a single calendar year, from roughly $9 a share to just over $5. Not because of a scandal or a recall. What happened was quieter and more lasting. The thing is, nobody wanted to be seen wearing a Fossil anymore. Fossil was never pretending to be Rolex. That was never the pitch. The pitch was smarter than that. A stylish, accessible watch that looked better than a rubber fitness band but didn't require a second mortgage. And for a time, roughly 2012 to 2018, that pitch genuinely worked. Department stores moved them by the thousands. They were the watch you bought your college roommate for graduation, the thing you put in a blue jewelry box with a bow on top, the gift that said, "I thought about you," without saying, "I spent a lot of money." Then, something shifted in the customer. The person who used to pick up a Fossil at $40 above cost at Macy's started to notice something interesting. For the same price, sometimes less, they could get a Seiko with an actual mechanical movement inside it. Or a Casio with 40 years of quiet, stubborn credibility and a following of people who genuinely knew what they were talking about. The competition wasn't arriving from above Fossil on the price ladder. It was coming from beside them and below them, from brands with real craft history that didn't need to manufacture authenticity because they'd been building the actual thing since before Fossil existed. But here's the part that doesn't show up in the earnings calls, and it's the part that matters most for understanding where Fossil actually is in 2026. Their survival strategy has quietly become something almost invisible to their own customers. The company manufactures movements and cases for other brands' licensed watch lines. Think of the Emporio Armani, DKNY, Michael Kors. Fossil makes movements and cases for them, which makes Fossil essentially a parts supplier wearing a retailer's jacket. The consumer-facing brand you see losing shelf space in department stores and the manufacturing company keeping the lights on are not doing the same thing. One is contracting. The other is hanging on by becoming invisible inside someone else's brand identity. That's a long way from where they were in 2015. By early 2025, Fossil had closed a meaningful portion of its standalone retail locations. The ones still open tend to sit in outlet corridors alongside candle shops and phone case kiosks. That's the geography of a brand in managed retreat. Not collapse, retreat. Slower, quieter, and in some ways harder to watch. There's a woman somewhere who still has the Fossil her dad bought her in 2015. Rose gold case, brown leather strap, bought at the Macy's counter on a Saturday afternoon while she was at college, wrapped and given to her at graduation. She doesn't wear it anymore, but she doesn't throw it out either. It sits in a drawer with expired gift cards and earrings missing their partners and a charging cable for a phone she no longer owns. That is Fossil's real position in 2026. Not hated, not loved. Just there. And in the watch world, just there is the last stop before gone. The observation that most coverage misses. Fossil didn't fail because they made bad watches. They made genuinely decent watches for the price. They failed because decent, in their price tier, stopped being enough the moment buyers understood what decent money could get from brands with real movement heritage. Fossil gave people a watch. Seiko gave people a reason to care about the watch. That difference is everything. Watch the forums. Watch You Seek threads from 2021 onward almost never mention Fossil, except in comparison discussions where the point is, get this instead. That's not a dismissal. It's an erasure. In the watch community, being the comparison point for a better recommendation is the quiet version of being finished. There's something worth understanding about how this kind of brand death actually feels from inside the industry. It doesn't arrive as a crash. It arrives as an absence of conversation. The brands that are losing in this era don't generate angry Reddit threads or industry exposés. They generate silence, the absence of passion, of aspiration, of the question, which one should I get? is the real warning sign. Fossil has been generating that silence for a while now. Not among everyone, not everywhere. But among the people whose enthusiasm actually moves watch culture, the silence has been there for years. So instead of buying a Fossil, buy the Seiko Prospex SPB143 or the Seiko 5 Sports. The SPB143 is a direct reissue of the 1965 Diver, a watch that was used in actual professional contexts and not just marketed as if it was. Automatic movement, day-date complication, 100 meters of water resistance, and a dial designed to be legible underwater in reduced visibility. The history behind it doesn't need to be invented. Retail around $450. The Seiko 5 Sports starts well below $200. Either of these is a watch that grows alongside its owner's knowledge. You understand more about it the longer you own it. Fossil doesn't have that dimension. There's nothing new to discover about a quartz movement in a branded case. Fossil lost customers because better became available at the same price. The next brand charged more and gave less, and somehow framed that as a luxury decision. Brand 4, Panerai. In 2023, Panerai raised the price on the Luminor base logo by roughly 15%. This was a watch that had already climbed from around $4,000 to $5,500 over the previous 4 years. So the price went up, and the movement inside got quieter about what it could do. They removed the hacking seconds function, which is the feature that lets you freeze the seconds hand to synchronize the watch to the exact second. They also stripped the Geneva stripes from the movement bridges. No press release accompanied any of this. The watch simply arrived at retailers looking slightly worse and costing noticeably more. That's not an oversight. That's a decision made in a meeting with slides and a projected margin improvement. Someone approved it. Panerai's real moment of genius came in the 90s, when they took a real naval instrument history and turned it into a collector's obsession. The case size was absurd by the standards of the era. 44 millimeters across when everyone else was running 36. But that boldness had an actual reason behind it. Italian Navy, World War II frogmen, diving equipment that had to be legible in dark water at depth. Then Sylvester Stallone found a vintage example in a Rome prop house in 1993, fell completely in love with it, and personally convinced the brand to go global. Or do the story goes. But it created a nice origin for the collectors who now had something they could hold on to, a reason to buy beyond the dial shape. By 2025, that story had been told so many times it had become wallpaper. You'd heard it before you walked into the boutique, and what replaced it in the marketing wasn't a new story. It was colorways. Limited editions with blue aluminum bezels, collaborations with brands that have no obvious relationship to the sea, to Italian naval history, or to the World War II frogmen who made the original brief compelling. The Luminor California, starting around $6,000 in 2026, uses the in-house P6000 movement. Independent watchmakers have described it as functional, not technically ambitious, not beautifully finished, functional. For a brand built on instruments meant to operate in extreme conditions, functional is the right answer. For a brand charging $6,000 in a market where Tudor's Black Bay 58, Grand Seiko, and Longines' Master Collection are all producing technically interesting movements at lower or comparable price points, functional is a problem you have to answer for. Honestly, I keep coming back to this one, because there's something genuinely uncomfortable about what Panerai is doing that goes beyond pricing decisions. The original PAM 00005, the Luminor base, in 44 millimeters, hand-wound, enormous, almost crude in its single-mindedness, was a watch that didn't need to explain itself. Pick one up secondhand today, and it still has that quality. The rawness is the point. It communicates function before it communicates status. The newer catalog keeps trying to become premium in a way that the brand's entire identity was built on not caring about. The watch that was great because it had nothing to prove is now asking you to pay for a refinement it can only partly deliver. The collector community noticed in a way that tends to be permanent. On WatchUSeek and WatchCrunch forums from 2022 onward, the conversation shifted in a direction that's very hard to reverse. Threads that used to ask, which Panerai should I add next, became, is Panerai still worth it at these prices? The people who'd owned 5 or 6 of them across 15 years were consistent. Not at current prices, not with these specification choices, not when Tudor and Grand Seiko are doing what they're doing right now. A boutique manager in Singapore was quoted in a watch industry publication in 2024 saying the Panerai section was generating more handling without purchasing than any other brand in the store. Customers would pick them up, turn them over, ask for the price, and set them back down. The interest hadn't disappeared, the conviction had. Those are different problems. One responds to a new model. The other requires a different kind of answer. Here's the observation that costs Panerai the most in the long run. They built their whole identity on authenticity, real history, real function, real toughness, tested in real conditions. When you charge more while quietly removing features, you're not just making a worse watch. You're telling the customer that the authenticity was always negotiable when the margin spreadsheet required it. Once a customer believes that, they start questioning everything else the brand ever told them. The story doesn't survive the specification decision. But if you are looking for a story that will survive alongside the watch, buy the Grand Seiko SBGW 235, around $4,500. Hand wound, with a movement finishing standard that makes Swiss manufacturers ask uncomfortable questions about their own craft benchmarks. The Zaratsu polishing on every surface, the anglage on every bridge and plate edge, the way the case catches light from 5 different angles. This isn't decoration. It's a demonstration of what watchmaking looks like when the people doing it are still trying to prove something. It won't have Panerai's action movie origin story. But in 20 years, that movement's finishing will still be genuinely impressive in the way that removing hacking seconds and the Geneva stripes won't be remembered as a bold decision. Panerai charged more for less and called it positioning. The next brands skipped the craft conversation entirely, and they've been getting away with it for 3 decades. Brand 3. Fashion watches Gucci, Emporio Armani, and the licensed badge. Let's say directly what these are. A Gucci G timeless quartz watch retailing at $270 contains a Ronda 715 or a similar Swiss-made quartz movement. The caliber itself costs the manufacturer somewhere between $4 and $10 depending on order volume. The case, the dial, the hands, and the strap are produced by a third-party factory operating under a licensing agreement with the fashion house. Gucci's design team specifies the aesthetic. Gucci's watchmaking team, to the extent one exists at this product tier, does not touch the movement. This is legal. It's standard practice in the industry. It is almost never said out loud in a watch boutique. The structure of a fashion watch licensing deal works roughly like this. A fashion house rents its name to a specialist manufacturer. The manufacturer handles production, quality control, and usually distribution. The fashion house collects a royalty, historically somewhere between 10 and 20% of wholesale, and retains creative approval over what the product looks like. Fossil Group operated this model for a roster of licensed brands for decades. So did Movado Group. These arrangements appear in annual reports. They don't appear on the caseback. Emporio Armani has operated this way since the early 90s. So has Michael Kors. So has Versace at its entry price points. You're buying the font on the dial, not the craft behind the hands. Now, there's an important distinction to make here. Buying a logo is not the same as being deceived. Nobody who looks at the price of a Gucci G Timeless seriously believes it was assembled by hand in a Genevan atelier. The price makes that clear enough. But there's a gap between honest fashion accessory and meaningful watch, and most fashion watch marketing sits deliberately in the ambiguous middle of that gap. Words like precision crafted and Swiss inspired and carefully engineered appear on packaging for movements that cost the manufacturer less than a taxi ride to the airport. The language does work, the product doesn't. But the object that gets hurt most by this positioning isn't the buyer's wallet, it's the fashion brand's wider reputation. Every time a Gucci watch lands on a department store discount rack at 40% off, and they do this seasonally and predictably, it doesn't just move old inventory. It erodes the luxury positioning of everything the brand sells. Gucci learned this aggressively in 2019 and 2020, when their licensed watch inventory began moving through discount and outlet channels in real volume. The watches sold, the brand's watchmaking credibility, such as it was at that price point, took damage in collector conversations that it hasn't recovered from. The way watch communities talk about this has a specific texture. Nobody says, "Don't buy a Gucci watch with anger." They say it with a kind of tired precision. you're buying a Ronda movement in a branded case, and then they move on to talk about something they find interesting. The dismissal isn't hostile. It's bored. There's a 17-year-old who asked for a Gucci watch for his birthday. He got it. Wore it to school the first day back after summer. Someone asked what it was. He said Gucci. The response came back, "Oh, my mom has one of those." He hasn't worn it to school since. Not because the watch changed, because the context around it shifted in one sentence. And no amount of product quality recovers a 17-year-old's confidence once that sentence has landed. A fashion watch is not a bad object. It tells time accurately. It carries a recognizable mark on the dial. It photographs finely in the right light. But it is not a watch in the sense that anyone who loves watches means when they say watch. It's a logo mounted above a battery, and the informed end of the market knows that and prices the resale accordingly. Fashion watch resale values on Chrono24 and eBay tell you everything. Most branded quartz fashion watches trade at 30 to 50% of retail within 2 years. The logo doesn't hold value. It just looked like it might, for a while. If you are looking for quality, go for Tissot PRX Powermatic 80, $575. Integrated bracelet with the kind of wrist presence that usually requires spending twice as much. Automatic movement with an 80-hour power reserve, which means you can leave it off your wrist for 3 days and still be running. The design is a genuine revival of the 1978 original PRX, which was a legitimate piece of watch history that got buried for 30 years and was correctly brought back in 2021. The Tissot earns "what is that?" from someone who actually knows watches. The Gucci earns "is that real?" The question tells you everything about where each watch sits in the mind of someone who pays attention. A fashion watch is easy to walk away from once you understand the structure. Brand 2 is harder because the watches are genuinely good. The problem is everything built around them. Brand 2, TAG Heuer, the most expensive credibility problem in Swiss watchmaking. In 2015, LVMH put Jean-Claude Biver in charge of reversing TAG Heuer's slide. His approach was aggressive and counterintuitive. Lower prices. The entry Carrera dropped from roughly $3,000 to around $1,500 at the low end. The logic was volume. Bring in more buyers. Expand the base. Create the next generation of TAG owners who'd trade upward as their careers grew. He also launched the TAG Heuer Connected, an Android smartwatch starting at $1,500, positioned as a luxury alternative to the Apple Watch. Whether that was visionary or a category mistake is a debate the watch industry still hasn't settled. What nobody discussed at the time, dropping prices to drive volume, created a secondary market problem that proved much harder to reverse than the original decline. Once TAG's watches started trading at steep discounts on Chrono24 within months of release, a Carrera Formula 1 at $900, retail flipping to $550 used within a year of purchase, the perception hardened quickly. TAG Heuer became the watch you buy when you're working towards something else, the brand in the waiting room, the placeholder on your wrist while you save for an Omega or a Rolex. That's a real position in the market. It just isn't a premium one, and premium is what the price tag requires. Once that story circulates in enough conversations between enough people who actually buy watches, it becomes almost impossible to overwrite with engineering data alone. And this is what makes the TAG situation genuinely frustrating, because the engineering has gotten better in a way that deserves more credit than it's receiving. The Carrera chronograph with the Heuer 02 movement, available now around $4,800, is a column wheel. Vertical clutch chronograph with an 80-hour power reserve and a movement architecture that independent watchmakers have described as seriously competent. Not just competent for the price, actually competent. LVMH spent real development money on Caliber 02. It's a genuine movement built by genuine watchmakers doing real work. The watch press praised it. Forums agreed it was good engineering. Resale values stayed flat. Because the narrative was already constructed, and the secondary market trades on narrative more than it trades on column wheels. The gap between what TAG actually produces and what the market believes TAG produces is, without exaggeration, the most expensive credibility deficit in Swiss watchmaking right now. The product is real. The respect isn't following. There's a man in his early 40s who bought a Carrera as a milestone piece in 2019. Promotion. First serious salary. The kind of moment that deserves a watch. He's proud of it and he should be. It's a good watch. But when he sets it next to a colleague's Omega Seamaster 300M at a dinner table, Something happens that has nothing to do with movement quality or case finishing or resale data. It has to do with what each watch communicates about its owner before a single word is spoken. That story is unfair to TAG. It's also real. And in the watch world, the story is the watch. So, is TAG repairable? Possibly. The path forward is clear enough in theory. Stop discounting, rebuild resale values over 5 to 7 years, let the Heuer 02 do the work it was designed to do. In practice, that requires the discipline to forego short-term volume for long-term positioning, which is a harder conversation to have in a quarterly earnings culture. In 2026, that discipline hasn't fully appeared yet. The value for your money would be the Longines Master Collection chronograph, or the Hydro Conquest. Longines sits inside Swatch Group alongside Omega, and has been quietly and systematically improving their movements for years without making loud claims about it. The Master Collection chronograph uses a column wheel L688 movement with a silicon hairspring, a technical specification that would have cost significantly more a decade ago. Around $1,200. A long, honest history. No gray market crater, no identity crisis, and no ceiling. A buyer who starts with Longines carries no embarrassment and has every option when they're ready to move upward. A brand with a credibility problem is still a brand. Number 1 on this list stopped being a brand somewhere around 2018. The price tags just never received that news. Before we move on to the next part, let me tell you this. Most people don't realize this, but buying a watch the wrong way can cost you thousands, and you won't even notice it until it's too late. You walk into a store or browse online, and everything looks the same, but behind the scenes, there's a system. Prices aren't always fair, availability is controlled, and one bad decision can leave you overpaying for something that doesn't even hold its value. That's why I created a complete free insider guide to buying watches. Inside, you'll find the best watches to buy, the watches to avoid, and how to choose a watch that actually fits your style and budget long term. The goal is simple. I'll help you stop guessing and start buying smart. You'll find the free guide in the pinned comment and description. Now, let's move on to the next part. Brand 1. Modern hype Rolex buying the story, not the watch. In October 2021, a stainless steel Rolex Daytona reference 116500LN Panda dial, black ceramic bezel, sold at a gray market dealer in Geneva for approximately $26,000. Its retail price was 13,100 Swiss francs. The buyer wasn't a watch collector in any traditional sense. He was someone who had heard, correctly, that Rolex was one of the few assets appreciating faster than inflation. He wasn't buying a watch, he was buying a position. By late 2023, that reference was trading at around $17,000 on the open secondary market. By mid-2025, some dealers were moving examples at $15,000. Still above retail, but moving in one direction only, and everyone in the market knew which direction that was. This is what a speculative premium looks like when it loses pressure. It doesn't collapse, it exhales. The fundamental question with buying a modern sports Rolex at 2026 secondary market prices is not whether Rolex is a good brand. Of course it is. It's whether the premium you're paying is for the watch or for the story. If you love it, plan to wear it for 30 years, and understand that the premium is simply the cost of access without a 2-year boutique relationship and a loyalty purchase history. That's a coherent position. You're paying for availability. If you're buying because it'll be worth more next year, you're taking on more risk than the Rolex mythology tends to communicate openly. And 2023 made that visible in a way that was expensive for a lot of people. Here's what the history of managed scarcity teaches when the cycle finally turns. Rolex controls production deliberately. The wait list is managed, not organic. It's a business decision, not a natural phenomenon of demand exceeding supply. When a brand manages scarcity that carefully, 2 outcomes are possible. They maintain it indefinitely, or the market loses confidence that the scarcity is real, that the waitlist is meaningful, that the premium reflects genuine difficulty of access, rather than manufactured friction. In 2022 and 2023, as secondary prices softened across sports references, the second thing began happening at a pace that surprised many dealers. People who bought Daytonas and GMT Masters at peak gray market prices began listing them and finding buyers only at losses they hadn't planned for. The watch hadn't changed. the story around it had. Now compare that to what has quietly happened with Rolex's own archive of watches that failed commercially. The reference, 5100 Beta 2-1, Rolex's experimental entry into the consortium-developed quartz movement that 16 Swiss brands developed together in the late 1960s as a response to Japanese quartz dominance, was produced in very limited numbers and discontinued without fanfare. It wasn't a success. It sold poorly and was quietly abandoned. A good example in correct condition today trades north of $15,000. Not because it was popular, because it wasn't. The irony is almost perfect. The watches Rolex couldn't sell are more valuable than the ones the gray market buyers were fighting over in 2021. Real rarity is accidental. Manufactured rarity is a quarterly decision made in a strategy meeting. The collector market knows the difference, and it prices accordingly over time. The 2021 gray market buyer wasn't wrong about Rolex. He was wrong about the mechanism that creates lasting value, and wrong about the time frame in which premiums operate. That misunderstanding cost roughly $8,000 when the correction arrived. So who did fine through all of this? The buyers who understood that the brand's strength compounds over decades, not quarters. The buyers who found their Rolex at retail through patience and a boutique relationship, who planned to wear it regardless of what the secondary market did on any given Tuesday. The collector who bought a reference 5512 Submariner with a gilt dial in 2010 for reasons that had nothing to do with resale. Those buyers are still fine. The watch is still running. The value has only moved in one direction. There's a man in his mid-30s who bought the green dial Submariner, the Hulk, reference 116610LV, at $32,000 during the peak. He turns up in watch forums occasionally. Not angry, just quiet about that particular purchase. He wears the watch, which matters, because at least he has the object he paid for. But there's a gap of around $8,000 between what he paid and what comparable examples trade for now, and that gap isn't closing. The watch on his wrist is a magnificent object, designed by serious engineers, built by serious machines, accurate to within a few seconds a day. All of that is still true. What's also true is that he paid for a story the secondary market was telling in October 2021, and that story, like most stories built on quarterly momentum, didn't survive contact with reality. Alternatively, you can buy a vintage Rolex reference 5512 Submariner or a Patek Philippe reference 3448 annual calendar. If you have the budget for a modern sports Rolex at gray market premiums, you have the budget for something that has already proved what it does over time. The reference 5512, with a gilt dial and meters first depth designation, has appreciated through every market correction since the 1960s, without exception. Good examples surface between $12,000 and $30,000 depending on condition. The Patek reference 3448 annual calendar in yellow gold, produced from 1981 and widely considered by serious collectors to be one of the last Patek references from the period when the brand was still taking genuine design risks, surfaces occasionally in the $30,000 to $50,000 range for buyers prepared to be patient. These watches don't follow the hype cycle. They were here before it started. They'll be here long after it's finished. And the people who own them will never need to check a resale app to know whether they made the right call. The watches that hold their meaning over decades aren't the ones with the longest wait lists or the biggest launch events or the most Instagram real estate. They're the ones where someone who knows nothing about watches picks one up, turns it over in their hands, and asks a real question. Not, is this real? Not, how much did you pay? Just, what is this? That question is the only quality test that really matters in the end. You can fake a lot of things in watchmaking. You can fake the heritage with a brand story, fake the finish with lighting in a boutique, fake the scarcity with a managed waitlist. You can't fake the answer to that question. Either the watch earns curiosity from someone who doesn't know to be impressed, or it doesn't. Right now, fewer releases are passing that test than the industry wants to admit. And that corner of the gray market dealer's shop, the one nobody points you toward, keeps getting a little more crowded every season. So which watch are you going to buy? Let me know in the comments. Also, hit subscribe and like this video for more.